Now, the Pretoria High Court has ordered the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition to determine the successful applicant for the fourth national lottery license by no later than May the 28th. In a ruling delivered on Wednesday, the court also directed the minister to negotiate a license agreement with the successful bidder by the same date. Additionally, the court declared as unlawful and invalid the minister's decision to extend the bid validity period for the license by 12 months. The legal action was initiated by Winanjalo, one of the bidders who launched an urgent application in March. This followed a notification in February from Minister Pakstau stating his intention to extend the bid validity period. We're now joined by Nobuntu Hlazo-Webster, Deputy Leader of BOSA and a member of Parliament's Trade, Industry and Competition Portfolio Committee, for some reaction. A very good afternoon to you, Nobuntu. Thanks very much for your time. The Minister is obviously in the United States still, so it's probably yet to look at this ruling. But how significant is it?
Thank you so much, Vuyo, and good afternoon to you and the viewers. It is very significant. I think I want to give some context, which I think is always important when we're talking about this issue. The national lottery license is the single biggest public tender in the country. It's 180 billion, and so it has to be beyond reproach. The processes that take place have to be beyond reproach when it comes to this process. And as Build One South Africa, we have raised for 9 months now, through various mechanisms in Parliament, through the Portfolio Committee, and in engagements with the Minister through that committee, as well as through written letters to the Minister, written questions to the Minister. We've raised issues about the process of this tender. We've raised issues about conflict of interests that exists, but also about the delay. And so this is a welcome ruling, because it confirms what we've been saying as Build One South Africa, which is that the minister's handling of this process has not upheld transparency. It has not upheld the accountability that South Africans deserve, especially for an institution like the National Lotteries Commission, which has been marred by governance issues and actually now needs to actually restore public confidence.
Look, I mean, as you say, this has been going on for a very long time, and as you just pointed out, I mean, this is a license to print money, essentially. Isn't the real question why it has taken so long to actually get to this point?
It absolutely is, because like you say, we have raised these concerns.
And you're not the only ones. I mean, several, people
We're not
and
the
have
only
really
ones.
been raising this over the years.
Absolutely. And in this instance, the Portfolio Committee itself has raised these issues with the Minister. I mean, we, for one, have asked the Minister and have specifically raised and said, this so-called independent panel, the adjudication panel, how was it appointed and who is on the panel? The Minister wrote back. We have the Minister's response in writing to us as Build One South Africa. He wrote back and he said that he's not at liberty to disclose who sits on that adjudication panel, and was very vague about the appointment process. At that time, we had raised issues of conflict of interest, not just in one company, not just one of the bidders. It is currently right now, obviously the issue becomes about Gold Rush, but there's also HCI, where we raised that there was a number of people who sit in that adjudication panel who have links and relationships with those companies. There's political proximity of bidders. These are all the issues that we have been raising, and the Minister has chosen to forge ahead. We then said to the Minister, currently, given delays, given the conflicts, you are risking us being as a country in a position where we don't have a national lottery operating in the country. Therefore, take a proper and procedural process to make sure that there's an interim plan. Because currently, as it seems, this process actually needs to be started from scratch. The Minister did not do this. And then in February, the Minister then announced that he would be appointing a temporary operator or an interim license. And even in that, did not then follow the right procedure. We then questioned, we wrote and said, what legislation was used? Is this within the boundaries or the bounds of the PFMA, of the National Lotteries Act? And we didn't have a response. So the minister has even been warned by ourselves as South Africa, by the Portfolio Committee, about the potential non-constitutionality of that temporary or that interim license.
Now, the interesting thing is that, these very same issues were raised even with Pakstau's predecessor, issues of proximity to some of these people, issues of, possible conflicts of interest.
Absolutely. So the reality here is that we just have to say this plainly and see what we're dealing with here. This is clearly a machine or a vehicle through which the ANC is then able to raise funds for its operations and for its various activities. That is something that's actually become quite clear because of the political proximity that you see. And you see it in a number of the major bidders. It's not just one. So this isn't actually even about saying that this is who should be appointed. It's about saying the process has got to be one that is transparent, that is fair, that is free of the interference, of political interference. That's all we're saying. And it's not about the who. I keep saying this. It's not about the who. It's about the how. How has this been reached? And it's about the why. This cannot be used as a fundraising tool for any political party. This ultimately is actually, you're talking about the lottery here. And this is actually a pool of funds that is used for the most vulnerable in our society and for the most marginalized in our society. Now, you have risked this very institution and the operations of it. And this is where we stand now, where we are at the end of May. There isn't a legally recognized process that's taken place for an interim plan, nor is there an appointment because of the issues that have been raised. And you now risk organizations, NPOs, not being able to benefit from the lottery. You risk a whole economic system because there is an ecosystem that actually exists around the lottery. There are retailers, there are slot machines, there's a whole system that exists, and you risk that ecosystem because of what seems to be an agenda, a political agenda that is at play.
The Pretoria High Court has delivered its ruling. Obviously, or it goes without saying that the minister will have to abide by that ruling, unless, of course, he wants to appeal. But the question I want to ask is whether, as far as you are concerned, the court's ruling do deal or address the underlying issues.
Look, I think the issue that is clearly addressed is that the National Lotteries Act and the PFMA don't explicitly provide for the way in which this interim license has been processed. I think that's a first, and that we agree with. Part of the issue comes with the ruling to then appoint by the 28th of May. For us, that is an issue because we do not believe that the process, the bidding process, has been fair. I've mentioned some of the issues that we've raised about the so-called independent panel. And so it becomes an issue because you then can't appoint in a process that's actually been fraught with conflicts of interest and other irregularities. And so, as Build Run South Africa, first of all, we submitted parliamentary questions on this issue. We've actually filed a PAYA request for the bid documents and for the identities of the people who sit on that independent panel. We then, on Tuesday this week, I tabled a notice of motion calling for the entire process to be cancelled and restarted with independent oversight. And so we're following up that process in Parliament as well. But what we continue to call for now in the interim is that the temporary arrangements be transparent, they be publicly tabled and time-bound, but the most important is that you cannot have a situation where the lottery is then affected by this and has to come to a grinding halt because of the decisions that have not been carefully considered by this minister or the previous.
That's where we're going to leave it for now. Nobuntu Hlazo-Webster, thanks very much for your time. She's the Deputy Leader of BOSA, but also a member of Parliament's Trade, Industry and Competition Portfolio Committee.